Hello. Bitte nochmal. Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, Mr. Doug, my friends. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for connecting. Thank you for surviving with a smile, hopefully. And most importantly, I think hopefully we can find a way to enjoy life, talk about wine, talk about life and good people, and maintain a decent, normal mind that stays healthy and somewhat sane. Today, as you might know and might have heard, I just wanted to say, you know, there's a tradition in cities, of course, in Europe, and not as much in rural areas, and for sure not in Napa, because things are spaced out differently as much. But in cities, they're really amazing scenes of everybody clapping at a certain time. In Spain, for example, my sister, she sent me a couple of videos of people clapping for the healthcare industry and all the, you know, the amazing nurses, doctors, drivers, delivery people, every single body that is out there helping, and even grocery clerks and people that are just trying to maintain and some kind of normal patterns in our life, and put their energy, their life, their family sometimes in danger. But really, it's amazing. So thank all of you. Thanks our bankers, because I know there's bankers around that listen to us and that are struggling to try to push the money arriving to small businesses and people like you and I, and really pushing that. I mean, there's a lot of people that are doing a lot of things to help, and honestly, thank you, because I don't think anything would be possible. Yes, we're sheltered in. Yes, we are at home. We're seeing pretty promising numbers, at least curves in California, but elsewhere, with the government reducing the amount of projected death. And honestly, in my side, I try to work twice as hard, try to create much more, you know, much more people, many more people that I know, that I care about, try to keep them entertained, to keep them happy, to be able to really, I don't know, to try to be there for everybody, I guess. And when I don't work, I do this. I don't know if you guys are aware of what this is. This is a Nerf. So my two sons attacked me a little bit earlier, probably approximately 7 minutes, of course, before this started, with Nerf guns through the house. And so we did a Nerf fight. And then the baby came in with his turtle and wanted me to keep him from crying. So life, I guess, goes as much as we can, and we try to maintain a normal rhythm and a normal life pattern as much as we can. But today we're here, and we have a special guest, which I think I told you guys last time. It's a friend of mine. He's somebody that I truly enjoy, truly respects, that we've met a bunch of different times before being able to work together, because I hope I could only get close to his heart, generosity, and soul, because that's how he's known throughout the valley. He's somebody that has been in the valley for a long time, that has been farming through his farming company, Oakville Farming, extremely well. He's a guy that I advise and recommend to a lot of clients because of that, because of the precision, because of his wife, because of Trevor, because a lot of different people that resemble who they are. His son, of course, Ryan, and Doug has been in my life first, actually, I think, through actually a vineyard that we use today in Carneros, in a vineyard that we'll talk quite a bit about, because that's where that rosé we're gonna talk about come from. And I was making wine for a brand called Virage at the time, and Doug was farming that site in addition to many different sites, because today, as I said, I try to have him work with me as much as I can because of that soul, and I think it makes my life easier. But Doug is also somebody that has a true tradition and a true sense of legacy for his family, for his practices. And it's also somebody that when we sit and blend, I was actually talking to a journalist today on a Zoom call, and I said, I think we benefit more from criticism, or I value more criticism than praise, because I think criticism gives you a chance to grow, to get better, to improve. And every single time that I blend with Ryan, with Allison, the winemaker that has been winemaker for 25 years. So, we're with them. So obviously Doug has been doing this for how many years, Doug, have you been farming in the Valley? 70?
Since 1977.
Since 1977. So you can see that it's been quite a while. 77, I was 4 years old. So, and he has that experience from the past, from the present, and the vision for the future. And I think that's something that I really love about him and all his farming. But enough said. He's a guy, as I was mentioning, that always doubts what I do, that always, it's never in a mean way. It's not even it's just, he expresses what he sees as the expression of a place, a terroir, a wine, a profile of a wine, and says it really with all the heart and in his sweetness, his kindness. But it pushes constantly the levels to higher. It constantly makes us, Allison, of course, and me, and Ryan, of course, and pushes us to rethink what we do. And because of that, we're able to progress. We're able to push it. We're able to kind of grow. And I think that is absolutely key, because it gets boring, I'm sorry to say, but if you go into places and everything you hear is, oh, it's great, it's great, it's great. Yeah, sure, it's great, but can we do just a little bit better and improve? And that constantly kind of links that vineyard, that brand, to the wine and to the quality of the wine that we make. So Doug, thanks a lot, because I really truly enjoy doing that, and really truly enjoy working with you. So why don't you tell, Doug, everybody a little bit how and why you ended up where you are in Napa Valley, doing farming, managing a really great brand, Tell us.
All right. Well, as you know, Jean, my grandfather was a farmer, and he came from Croatia and settled down in the Santa Clara Valley in Cupertino, actually, in the early 1900s. And he farmed apricots and prunes and cherries. And my dad actually was involved with the Mariani dried fruit family up in Washington State. And Paul Mariani Jr. invited him down to do, when a project he was doing with them up there was completed. And he came to the Santa Clara Valley, met my mom down there, and he started farming there. But farming was more in his blood than he was working at a ladder company, I think, building wood ladders that they use in the fruit harvest at the time. And he decided he really wanted to farm full time. And so actually back in 1957, made a decision to buy a property in Sonoma County, just south of Healdsburg in the Russian River appellation. We weren't growing grapes back then, though. It was prunes and apples and a few cherries. And so I grew up with a lot of fruit growing. But vineyards, I farmed with my neighbors who had vineyards, and it was a lot more fun. You didn't have to climb ladders, number one. You just walk along, and it was a lot easier. But the whole romance for me growing up, my dad always went up to Pedroncelli Winery and filled his gallon of Zinfandel, brought it home, and he'd only drink a glass a night. And I think by the end of the month that, it was time to exchange it for a new gallon of wine. But it was, that was my upbringing. We raised or grew 70% of what we ate. So we had, big garden, lots of fruits that my mother canned. We shared a cow with the neighbor. We milked it in the evening. They milked it in the morning. So we had all fresh butter that we hand churned ourselves. We had a split a steer every year when the calf that we raised with the neighbor. We had half in our freezer. They had half in their freezer. We raised pigs. We raised chickens. We raised rabbits, sometimes goats, and once in a while a lamb. And so it was kind of still with the pioneering spirit of creating what you eat. And I got into winemaking, actually 1972 was my first year in making homemade wine. And the first one, it was November, it was already cold out. And I got a crock pot and I found some grapes, I fermented them. They were some kind of I would say a Concord grape. And I have to say, I had them out. They wouldn't ferment outside. I brought them inside by the heater. And before they were completed fermenting, it was already turning to vinegar. So that was my first experience, John. That's why you're here working with us. No, but I did move on. The next year was better. And my cousin, who was a winemaker at Krug at the time, came and tasted my barrels of wine. And I made 6 barrels of wine in my second year. So he goes, oh my God, I could sell this for $5 a bottle. Now we're talking 1973. So that was pretty good. And
That's a good price.
yeah. So I always wanted to make wine, but I got into farming and raising a family and these things and managing vineyards, came to the Napa Valley, managed vineyards for the Jaeger family who had grown their acreage, from 400 to 600 acres while I was with them of vines. And in the meantime, began tending my own vines, bought a property in Carneros in 1984 and moved on to lease some different properties and have developed a lot of vineyards in the valley. And finally, by the time my kids were in high school, and I recognized maybe they weren't going to be farmers exactly, maybe I'll have a grandson that's a farmer, but they really love the wine business. And so to keep family business going, we got in the wine business together, starting our first crush in 2001.
And I have a question. When did the crop, you mentioned that it was prunes and other things. When did you see that shift between other crop to grapes really taking over? I mean, what era was that?
Well, there was a big boom that began to happen, I'd say the early 70s in Sonoma County where I was at the time. And so yeah, the prune trees were being pushed out, and it wasn't a crop that was paid as much on quality as on tonnage. And so they found they could produce a lot more prunes per acre in Yuba City and the Sacramento Valley. And so prunes weren't really making it. You know, there were some good apple orchards and different things, but the grapes were coming on strong. And I had remembered when I was in college, and a guy named David Stair, who started Dry Creek Vineyards, he came to our viticulture class, and he said, we are going to make wine, and we're going to sell it for $7 a bottle. And we were just, that was knocking our socks off, you know, back then.
And do you think because you kind of lived that beginning at these $5-7, you know, price point, is this also one of the reasons why you're so reasonably priced today in your brand? You really have great quality of wines that are extremely well priced at honestly prices that you don't see anymore in Napa Valley. Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, it's taken me a long time to come around. And, you know, my parents went through the Depression. And, you know, when you're working for 10 cents an hour, a dollar was worth a lot of money. And so I think that, you know, part of my mission in life is that I feel I grew up with in this life that was idyllic in some ways. I loved what we did in the farming. We worked hard, but we worked as a family, and, you know, we didn't have much money. And so I think that, you know, for me, I just love sharing that kind of experience with everyone out there. You know, you can produce your own food, you can produce your own wine and share it together. And sharing food and wine is, I think, one of the best things we can do in life with our families, with our friends, with our neighbors. And I have met so many wonderful people being in this business. You have this commonality, and I can go to a vineyard anywhere in the world and go, yes, I understand what's going on here to a certain extent. So I think back to costing. I have been, yes, a big influence, I suppose, on keeping our pricing down, because I want to share it with everyone, and I want to share it with people so they can drink it every day. Unfortunately, Napa Valley for most people is out of reach except for special occasions. And so my thought has always been, if we can share in a way that people can drink our wine every day, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, again, it's sharing that legacy. And I think it's sharing, you know, that philosophy of the old Napa. And I think that's pretty amazing to do that. And you know, I see you in the vineyard all the time, left and right. Not that you need to, but you care. And I think what is for me really transpiring into your brand, into your family, into everything you touch and do is the care, and not a care for monetary reason, not to become rich or famous, but to give to the next generation. It seems to give to others. What you received in a way for transmission, and I really enjoy that, and I can only, you know, congratulate you for doing that, because it's something quite amazing. The first wine we're gonna you know, taste tonight is actually a rosé. It's 2019 rosé from Carneros. It's actually from you know, a vineyard kind of behind the pumpkin patch, if you see at the cross of 29 and 121. And it's a vineyard that where Doug and I kind of met a bunch of times with somebody that I was working with and buying some of these grapes. And now we have it for the Hill family vineyard, family estate, and really using that Pinot section for that particular rosé. So one thing I want to start with is it's a pain. Rosé is one of the hardest wine to make on the face of the planet. And here's the reason why, so you understand a little bit why. Rosé, because it doesn't stay in contact with the skin, it actually has to be extracting some of these aromas and color fairly fast. So you have mainly two different styles of rosé, of making a rosé. One is direct press. You take a varietal, it could be Grenache, it could be Pinot, it could be Merlot, Cabernet, and you go directly in a press. The press is usually, you know, an inflatable membrane that grows and pushes the grapes against a metal surface, and the juice kind of falls down, you know, and that's how you do rosé, and you regulate the color of that based on the pressure you apply, because the more pressure you're going to apply, the more the skin is going to release some of that color. And so that's one. The other one is rosé of saignée, which is you take whatever juice you take out of a red tank, you know, and very early on, because you want to concentrate more your reds, so you can really take away that juice to change the ratio of skin to juice and make more concentrated red. The greatest way to make rosé is I think direct press, and in this case we decided to direct press it and out of Pinot Noir. Why? Because Pinot Noir is very thin-skinned varietal, very subtle, has really nice elegance, and I think is less tannic as well than a lot of the different other varietals. So it was fairly easy. But Doug, who likes to you know, make wine and position wine in his wine at a really, really approachable price, has to be careful of what happens. And I learned through Ludovic Dervin, actually, from Mum, that one of the great way to extract aromatics on a rosé was to actually harvest the rosé, let it sit, the berries attached to the cluster in little bins so it doesn't compress and oxidize for a certain amount of time before you press it, so the aromas, the fruitiness start extracting before it's even pressed. And so that's actually what we did, and how we did it on this particular rosé. We actually left it 48 hours in a cold chamber, and then we went to press, and we extracted this beautiful, you know, rosé that I really hope that you can enjoy it while you can and while it lasts, because it's a very popular item. And we kind of blended it both stainless steel, a hint of wood sometimes, but not always, just to give a little bit of lushness. One of the really hard things to understand with rosé, first, is how do you extract these aromas, right? Because the reds or the whites, you know, for example, some Sauvignon Blanc in Bordeaux are skin macerated, right? Some reds, of course, you ferment them on skins for 14, 21, 60 days. I went all the way to 120 days on skin on certain reds. So you have all that time to extract all these aromas from the skin. The rosé has such a short, limited window of extraction that it's really hard to get. The second thing that you have to understand with rosé in general is that acidity, that freshness has to come there to hold the wine together, but it cannot be linear. It can never be something that is absolutely monoaromatic, monoprofile. You want to give a little bit more mouthfeel, a little bit more roundness. And so there are a couple of things to do that. One is stirring, the other is barrel. The other one is leaving it on lees, right? Stirring with the lees, the dead yeast that precipitate at the bottom of the barrel, to give a little bit more roundness, to give a little bit. But that balance is a fine balance, because you never never want to overpower that freshness and that vibrancy of the acidity and the aromas, of course. And the last but not least, that is for me something that you have to pay attention, probably on rosé more than any other wine in the world, it's color. Because let's be honest, in Napa, red color is an afterthought. You know, it's always ripe, it's always there. There's plenty of things you can do with temperatures, with a lot of different things that you can actually elevate the color of wines at harvest, create plenty enough of anthocyanin extraction without a problem whatsoever. On white, depending on if you do Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay, The color is not really that important, except of course if it gets really oxidized. So a little bit more, a straw-like yellow, heavier, deeper yellow. That's usually an older white because it's oxidized. But if it's a younger wine like that, it's usually either they did certain maceration or they went for a different style, different aromatic profile. But there's actually no other wine that carries such an importance as the color as rosé. And in rosé, you have two major direction of color. One is you can have the apricot-like, the little bit more orangey type of rosé, or you can have the more pink one. And honestly, this rosé is kind of it's kind of a really light, I would say salmony color, so a little bit more on the apricot, side, but there's also hints of pink, as you can probably tell better from my own glass here. It's really pretty shiny, kind of color, and if you smell this rosé, it's full of, for me, flowers and fresh fruit and fresh pickly fruit, right? Or almost the mist, the dew of the morning on fruit, and that's something that I really enjoy. Honestly, that for me, that rosé was a big success, and we created with Alison Doran, who has been the winemaker forever there, and who actually is the person that truly works while I just appear on camera. And stuff like that, but Alison, is really precise in her winemaking, and it helps a lot with such SKUs, such wines as rosé, because you really don't have a lot of margin for mistake on rosé. The time of picking is one. The pressing cycle is two. Fermentation temperature is three, and vessel, and is the stirring regime. So all these are really you have to be really closely on top of these characteristics to be able to make and extract a rosé that has a real personality. It's too easy to make a rosé that is just, a lot of people said, oh, do you leave sugar into rosé? No, I don't, and we don't. And I think certain rosé did at the beginning of the 90s and 2000. Today, I think a rosé is vibrant, is aromatic, it's fruity, but should not have sweetness. And it's a wine that is becoming extremely popular, throughout the world. It's restarting. South of France being, again, Provence being kind of the mecca of rosés in the world. And if you look also, which is kind of funny, something that most people don't think about, rosé has a purchasing pattern and a purchasing period that is very different than any other wine. You can drink Chardonnay in the winter. You can drink Sauvignon Blanc in the winter. But rosé, I can tell you, the study is absolutely clear. Rosé sales are between February to September, maybe October. That's it. The rest of the year, you don't sell rosé outside of two brands, Whispering Angel and Domaine Haute in Provence. These are the two brands that dominate kind of the rosé world outside of the warmer days, right? And so the warmer days means what? You want a fresher product, and therefore you want a little bit more acidity and fragrance. Do you have, Doug, do you have anything to add? Do you want to tell us anything about your view of rosé?
Oh my God. I really love the wine, and especially with some of the things we've been doing that you've recommended, Jean. This year let's talk about last year, meaning 2018, the crush previous to this one. We did so much research and experimentation with different yeasts, with different barrels in fermentation, and trying different things. And this year, we took it to another step. We actually picked a portion of the vineyard on a Friday, and we put it in cold storage to get that kind of extraction you were talking about. And then we came and picked the remainder of the vineyard 3 days later. And It worked. That's all I can say. I just love the mouthfeel of this wine. The aromas are beautiful. And I think it does real justice to this site in Carneros, where we planted these vines in the early 90s.
And you have to understand that you farm vineyards differently for rosé. You want a little bit higher yields to slow down the ripening and not push sugar accumulation too fast, and also to be able to have bigger yields, so the influence of the skin is not as big for carb extraction as well. So it's a very, very fine border to cross to make great rosés. And to Doug's credit, one of the point that he and I share the most is probably vibrancy and acidity in wine. Mm-hmm. And without acidity and rosé is nothing. So it's really nice to be able to share that thought.
Yeah, freshness, I think, in wine can be a really important factor. And not only that, but when you have a wine with acidity, it'll age for quite a while. And, you know, I'm still drinking white wines from the late 70s and early 80s that were produced in the Napa Valley. And they were produced with a little lower alcohol, but a fair amount of acidity, and they're still brilliant, beautiful wines.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's really a key part, and I think that we lost as an appellation, as a region, too many years, or some of us, into making wine that forgot acidity and forgot vibrancy, in both red and whites, and we ended up, you know, wasting the potential of Napa's legacy ultimately, and that's something that is really difficult for me to swallow, because as I usually say, you know, the backbone of a wine is its acidity, and in reds the skeleton is the tannins. So if you don't have acidity, it's much harder to age these wines, and so I think it's definitely something that is key into the making of any wine. Rosé, of course, white, but reds as well. And so your son just joined us, Doug, at least on Instagram. So Ryan, happy to see you, you know, kind of being interested by your dad and I, mostly your dad. I understand he's your dad and he's such a good guy. But I'm sure I hope you walk in the vineyard, enjoying the nature was great. So God only knows what you were doing, but good to see you here. The next one we're going to talk about, Ryan, is
Ryan was busy doing marketing, Sean.
Yeah, I know that actually, but I enjoy so much giving him trouble.
Oh yes,
he has such a good sense of humor, and I feel so part of your family that, you know, it's just kind of my pleasure.
Absolutely
To enjoy him and you and laugh about it. One thing that you guys need to know tonight, that was a really cool moment. I think it was actually not this year, it was last year. Yeah, Ryan, we know you love trouble. We were going to pick a tiny little vineyard that Doug farms, and we actually called them, and it's honestly, it's a half an acre, not even, it's a quarter of an acre. And so we actually left a message stating that we want to divide it, that quarter acre, in 6 different picks. You should have seen the reaction we got. So funny, between him, Allison, between Doug and Allison. Oh, how is that possible? You guys are crazy, and stuff like that, because we're just picking their brain. And as you can imagine, during harvest, especially in Doug's position, more than anybody, you know, you have so much to do because you have so many vineyard parcels, block clients that you have to take care of, you know, and really attend to. In every decision, every step of the way is time sensitive. We knew what button we were pushing, and it made us laugh quite a bit. So thanks for that laugh, Alison and Doug. It was great. So the next one we're going to taste, guys, is actually 2016. Hello. And it's a Merlot from the Beauterre vineyard. And I'm going to tell you a little bit what I think about 2016. For me, it was the drought vintage, fairly warm vintage, but not as many big heat spells. And so really progressed in that ability to kind of manage that. And so we're able to protect a little bit the integrity of Merlot. Merlot is, for me, something that is extremely difficult to make in Napa because it's a thinner skin varietal. Of course, for me, the king region of Merlot is, of course, the right bank of Bordeaux. We know that. And because it's a thinner skin varietal, it's a varietal that is much harder to time and to get right. And a great friend of mine, and a great winemaker, Geneviève Janson, you know, the winemaker of Mondavi for years and years and years, and decades. Geneviève talked to me one day and says, hey, Jean, you know, on Merlot and Napa, you know, what I do is I usually pick them when they don't taste like anything. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. Because there are two ways of making Merlot in Napa. And I think Napa is actually ultimately, especially in the north part, maybe not always suited because people go the wrong direction. They overripe Merlot. And Merlot becomes just a kind of a pale expression of Cabernet Sauvignon. Merlot is not that. Merlot is something that is sensitive, that is fragile, that you have to pick earlier. And as Geneviève was saying, if you pick Merlot when they don't taste anything, you're going to end up putting it in, you know, in a blend and really expressing that elegance and that really refined taste of the Merlot. And so it works really well to protect that acidity, to protect that fragrance as well. So Merlot is a very, very difficult place and varietal to make in Napa. And honestly, the best Merlot I see in Napa are either in the mountains or really south. And this Beauterre vineyard is actually south of Napa in the Oaknall district, so closer to the bay, and keeps a bigger, better freshness into the grapes and the varietal that you can actually express it. So you usually tend to have a little bit more lifted fruit, a little bit more red fruit, a little bit more fresh fruit driven wine. And that Beauterre vineyard is really the bay, if you want, acts a little bit like an AC system, air conditioning system, that really helps to protect that. We have two clones, if I'm not mistaken, and Doug will tell you more. I think a Rosetto and 181 down there, if I'm not mistaken, Doug.
That's correct.
And on two
Italian clone.
Yeah, on two different rootstocks. So again, we have a little bit of diversity to play with, which is really great. And I think that's, you know, in a year like 16, to have vineyard South Napa, that you can really kind of slowly ripen because it's cooler and you have a bigger influence of the bay and very often of the fog. It really releases these very refined, elegant aromatics that you get into Merlot. And so, unfortunately, Merlot got killed by a movie I'm not going to mention, and of course, we're in a country that swings extremely hard in directions of certain trends. Pinot Noir became extremely popular after Sideways, and Merlot plunged. Merlot is coming back as a varietal because I think that overall people are interested in a little bit more balance, are interested in wines that have a little bit more expression, and we are moving away from the ginormous powerhouses, sometimes sweet powerhouses of red wine in the valley. Doug, what would you think are the three characteristics of Beauterre that are really giving the ability to that Merlot to produce such elegant cranberry, red fruit driven note?
Okay, so first of all, we have Beauterre Vineyard in Oaknall, and then Beauterrois in Carneros. Both vineyards are influenced by San Pablo Bay and the cool breezes that come through. And so I think that's a huge part of what we have toward, you know, maintaining acidity, creating very good color in the cooler climate. Beauterre is an amazing vineyard as well. The Oak Knoll vineyard there, we are on an alluvial fan where we actually have rocks and gravel in parts of this vineyard. And so the roots go down, and it keeps an element of slightly earlier ripening for a somewhat cool area, but allows us, by our trellising and things, to add a little more crop to hold the harvest back so it doesn't come in too early. Beauterrois, the Carneros vineyard, we call it Beauterrois because it just has every different aspect, every different soil type. We have from volcanic ash or tufa in some areas. We have western exposures, eastern exposures with a little more clay content, silty loam in some areas. And this area being in Carneros, some parts of the vineyard are very windy. Some areas are a little bit sheltered from the wind with an eastern exposure and the wind coming out of the southwest. We have rocky areas that are facing at the sunshine. It just gives us a whole lot of opportunity for differences. But I think mostly the cool climate, I agree with what you said with regard to Merlot. And that is, growing it in the cooler end of the valley, we really come up with very interesting fruit flavor components as the wine slowly ripens and develops beautiful, beautiful color, beautiful character.
So we have hello from Puerto Rico. Thank you for the Rupso comment as well. Yeah, and you know, I think in the Hill Family Estate lineup, that wine, that Merlot, is so lifted with notes of wood, but really well defined, not overpowering. And I think that's a very important characteristics as well in Merlot, is every time you have a varietal that is not as powerful and big, you should limit the wood intake because you're going to overpower it, right? And so it's something that you want to make sure that stays in check with these type of things. One of the other things that I want to comment on Doug's description of Beauterre, you know, because you have that rocky parts of that vineyard, it makes it that we have Merlot, you also have Cabernet down there, you have a bunch of different varietals on this site. It stays out of the late season pick because it is on these better drained soils. In that region, a lot of regions in Oak Knoll, you have sometimes these gray clay that are really heavy and a little bit more delaying. You have to understand that the water accessibility and the reheating of the soils kind of delay the format. In that Beauterre, we have that little bit earlier ripening because of these soils that are very special, very specific to that site, which for me is really nice because it's never an issue. It's never a vineyard that I call that has a chance of getting its feet wet because it's always outside of the major rain system that we sometimes encounter in Napa Valley. And I think that's really good, despite the fact that it has that San Pablo influence and that really kind of freshness lifted fruit. And it's honestly a really well made wine.
You know, Jean, I used to farm I would say in the 90s, I farmed more acres of Merlot than anyone else in the Napa Valley. Your family was very big with it. They had Rutherford Hill Winery, Freemark Abbey Winery, Jaeger Inglewood Estate. And so I got a lot of experience early in growing Merlot grapes. And when we started our first vintage, 2001, we were actually going to make Merlot our flagship. And guess what happened in the process while the wine was still in barrel? What you mentioned a little bit earlier, Sideways, a movie, kind of destroyed the whole image. And we decided very quickly that maybe making Merlot a flagship at a time where everyone was going more toward Pinot and saying Merlot was not a great variety was not the thing to do.
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, another thing about Merlot that I like. So as you know, I used to be winemaker up at Newton, and when I came in 2001, we had a flagship Merlot, just like you thought, called Epic Merlot, which was the best Merlots of Spring Mountain, and that also disappeared for the same consequences of the movie. It's crazy that such a media can influence dramatically, a varietal, and I'm really happy it's coming back, because it's a variety that is really showing great results if well managed. We have a question for you, Doug. Talk a little bit about the 2015 Merlot from Hill Family Estate.
2015?
Yes.
Oh my God, what a beautiful year. We had a lot of cool weather near harvest, and it took a while for the grapes to get ripe. And I love that wine. It is just, oh my God, it sits on the palate so well and just fills the mouth with joy. I'm trying to remember back to, various, it was obviously a part of the drought as well. And so it was a challenge growing grapes at the time. Fortunately, we have drip irrigation systems on our vineyards so that we can accommodate the vine when Mother Nature hasn't been as good to us as we would like to see. But as I recall about the 2015 vintage, it was, we had a fairly cool autumn, and it just created wine. It extended the maturity timetable so that the grapes could sit on the vines for longer. And we just I thought it was a really incredible wine. I love that wine.
Yeah, I mean, 2015 was stunning. Drought year 15, it's true, but it was at the beginning of the drought. And I think it's the most later ripening varietal that suffered from that. So I think Cab actually suffered a little bit more, and especially in certain sites with dehydration, if I remember correctly. But Merlot really gave great results because they usually ripened a little bit earlier, and therefore they were really being able to be picked at their prime. And 2015 is in certain regions and certain wines tannic, because people, I think in certain cases, did not sort out dehydration or push extraction too far in some parts of the valley. But for Merlot, it was extremely even, and very, the grapes and the berries were very healthy and plum, plush, and that worked. It gave really good balance to these wines. I agree. I would have to say that.
Well, the crop load was balanced, even though it was, it was a good crop. It was really balanced on the vine and allowed it to hang well, and it just created a really marvelous Merlot grapes that year.
Yeah, what do you think? Or I mean, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the biggest fault of Merlot, though?
The biggest fault?
Yeah.
Oh, well, as a grapevine, it's tough sometimes getting a crop, and that is it shatters very, very easily. Merlot and Malbec is another one that's somewhat similar. And so, we've changed our growing styles over time, and to make sure that we have a balance of wood. If you leave too little, well, they call it Merlittle sometimes too. And that's because when it shatters, it can shatter tremendously and only end up with 20 or 30 or 40% of a crop. And so what we've tried to do is create pruning and trellising that will allow it to set a crop in a majority of the years. So I think that's number one. And we really don't want to set a light crop, because it's not like, we grew up in the industry with the stories that from France, especially from Bordeaux and different places, where you're really pushing crop level against being able to mature your vine. So you have to have a lighter crop to get the maturity level. Now, with too light a crop with Merlot, it will tend to produce sugar early before the grape has fully had the time to do away with some of the greener characteristics in the fruit. And so we can't produce a really light crop that produces sugar really early because the grape has not caught up with maturation. And so you get a little greener flavors. You just get something that hasn't developed as well. And so when we talk about faults of Merlot, if you set a very light crop, it's sometimes harder to get the right maturity with it.
Yeah, it's a varietal balance. I think it's really something that and it's a very difficult, fragile. I call it a very. It's a varietal of finesse, and I think it's really difficult to express and find this type of balance, and especially in tougher region. Napa is blessed with an amazing climate and a consistency of climate, but you're right, the two varietals, Merlot and Malbec, are the big shatter ones. Sometimes it's in Cabernet, of course, as well. 2015, you remember we had some shatter on Cabernet. So,
and then one other fault of Merlot in grape growing is that if you cane prune it, it's really easy in many years to have canes where the mid buds in the cane do not push, they don't grow, or they grow very little. You have 6 inches of growth and a full cluster on it, which frequently is cut off because it doesn't have a big cane to support it or shoot to support it. So this is another example of Merlot that can be a challenge. And if you do shorter canes, it works a little bit better with more evenness of bud push.
But have you tried curving the cane? Because by curving the cane, when you do cane pruning on Merlot, that middle part that is weaker has a tendency, especially if you trellis it up, that high point seems to push a little bit better.
We've done some, because certainly in a grapevine you get apical dominance, that is the end wants to grow out. These are vines, they were always out seeking sunlight somewhere, growing up, attaching to trees and forests or shrubs to get up into the sunlight. And so you have an apical dominance, and especially with Merlot, it's the hormones just act a little differently than some of the other vines. You can get this huge push in the center and the head, and a huge push on the end. And we talked about the mid buds sometimes having trouble. And so when you arch it, you actually have a high point that is the center of the cane rather than the end of the cane. And that can improve things, although we found it a little bit challenging at times, because your system needs to be set up. When you arch, if you have a wire to put up and arch it over and then come back down and tie it, it's a little more stable out there. As things start, the crops maturing and things, it moves a little bit on just an arch cane without support.
Somebody's is commenting, for some reason, Merlot 100% varietal does not agree with me at all. Well, there's a few wines. I mean, you can try this wine, 2016 Merlot from Hill Family. You can try Petrus. That is Merlot, different price point for sure. You can try, of course, Maceto from Ornellaia in Tuscany is 100% Merlot, mythical, great, one of the great wines of the world. So there's a lot of really well-made Merlots in the world that I'm sure you can actually enjoy. Well, Doug, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope you'll join us for the next tasting for Hill Family. Again, it's always a pleasure, and I always learn something with you. And I think that's part of why I love you and your family so much. Between beyond the heart part and the human side, you're so willing to share knowledge and views that young generations have a lot to learn from you. So thank you very much. I mean it.
Well, we all have a lot to learn, Jean. Always a pleasure to work with you. I love that European heritage. My grandparents were European, and I think carrying on tradition is a very important aspect of it.
So thank you all. I'll see you all tomorrow with AXR at 5:30. Thanks for joining us. Be safe, be healthy, and keep drinking wine. Bye-bye.
Bye.